Hello and welcome back to the second part of our session this morning, the Forum on Food Waste 2021, which the EPA is calling Countdown to 2030, Building Knowledge to Waste Less. Now, you will have seen in the first contribution this morning, Odile LeBlanc, who is the project leader on food waste in the EPA, started with this overview on greater data collection that the EPA has been engaged in. Now we're going to be joined by her EPA colleague Helen Searson for a deeper dive into that data and to talk about some of the best examples of food waste prevention that have worked from across the whole supply chain. Once again, she is virtually one of the few people not attending virtually, so I'm going to hand the podium over to her now. Helen, good morning to you.
Very much, Philip. And good morning, everybody. So I'm here today to just share a little bit of work that we have been doing on building knowledge across the supply chain, in particularly with regards to data. So you may remember the slide that Odile shared earlier, and we had the different stages of the supply chain. And one of the areas that we felt there was low confidence in the data was in the manufacturing and supply sector. So we've been doing quite a bit of work on this in the last number of years. So last year we undertook a project. We worked with Resource Futures and Flannery Nagle to look at much more detail in at the available sources of food waste data. So our first step was to establish a database and to determine the sectors that were producing the largest quantities of food waste in Ireland. So our estimates had ranged between 400,000 and 900,000 tonnes were coming from the food manufacturing sector. Now, that was based on extract from National Waste Statistics, which really was not intended for food waste reporting, so we knew that the confidence in this data was low. So the sectors that we determined to be the 5 largest ones were meat, dairy, seafood, prepared foods, and bakery. And then we engaged with each of these sectors. There was phone-based interviews and an Excel survey on their food waste. So what we found was that all of these sectors were quantifying their food waste, that many of them that were very adept at finding secondary markets, but there was a lot of room for improvement. There was discrepancies on the interpretations of definitions, and I think that's come up a number of times today. You know, what are the clear definitions of food waste? And even within sectors, there would be slight differences in how people are interpreting what they should be reporting. And feedback from the industry was that they would welcome guidance on this. So to bring this work further and to address the data quality issues and to support businesses in gathering their data, we have been developing a standard measurement protocol. That's what we're calling it at the moment. So we're working with a consortium. CTC are leading it, and they're also working with RAP in the UK, and Flannery Nagle and Antisis. So I'm really just going to introduce you to the protocol. This is a screenshot. You're really not going to be able to read all of this or see all of this, but it's just to give you an example of that it follows a process. So we know that industrial food and manufacturing sites are very complex and they'll have multiple food waste flows. So the protocol is designed to bring a consistency of approach, to follow a step-by-step method and base it on weight-based information. We're also designing this protocol to be compatible with other reporting requirements. We're very conscious that we don't want to increase the reporting burden for businesses, so where we can, we're going to embed it into other programs like Origin Green. So you start by looking at the process-related food flows, gather the information that you have, and also identify where the gaps are, what information you don't have. So plug that data into quite a simple Excel sheet, and that will give you a figure on your food waste. Then you start to gain insights from your data. You can identify opportunities, and you can move to set targets and improve, and monitoring progress and reviewing this. So the last section of that is kind of a continuous loop. You'll continue to gather your data and monitor progress based on projects that you've implemented. So just to get back to the methodology in a little bit more detail. So the protocol aims to get businesses to start looking at the process-related food flows. So you build a complete picture of the flows related to your food production facilities. This should help you reduce costs, hopefully create value-added income, and reduce the carbon impact associated with your business. So this can be achieved by identifying innovative ways to reduce the generation of wasted food materials. And I think, it's come up in discussion a lot today. What we're very conscious of is, yes, we want to measure by the definitions, but really we're looking at preventing food waste. We want to move things up the hierarchy and make sure, where possible, that food is going for human consumption. So this diagram also helps with that. You can see on the right-hand side the different stages of the food waste hierarchy, and this just leads you to pushing those materials up that hierarchy. So the benefits to business, really it's to measure in a comparable way to others in your sector, to identify the potentially preventable wastes, to move unavoidable waste up the hierarchy and valorize where there is potential to do that. Then you can look at the evaluation of opportunities and continue to monitor your progress by measuring your food waste on an annual basis. And this will help make continuous improvements. It should save money and reduce the waste bills. It will also help businesses address customer demands for sustainable food sources and reducing carbon impacts. And I think it was very interesting what came out of the poll today, that a lot of what's driving this for businesses is reputation. And engaging and measuring your food waste, you should be able to, in a very clear way, communicate to your stakeholders and your customers what you're achieving. Again, as more businesses engage on measuring in a comparable way, we will be able to establish sectoral benchmarks, and then you can assess your performance against other businesses. So we have developed this draft methodology, and we are very keen that it is something that is usable and useful for the industry. So at the moment, we're piloting the methodology, and we've chosen 3 sectors: the seafood sector, the bakery, and prepared foods. And we have 5 businesses from each of those sectors looking at it. I think we've already had some really useful feedback on what would work better from companies in those sectors, and we will be tweaking the methodology to make sure that it is as usable and useful as possible. So from our part, the EPA, we're going to continue to lead with the national programme. We're going to continue to work on improving the data. We are going to develop sectoral benchmarks and indicators. We are going to work on increasing business commitment for measurement and prevention. And we will work towards developing sectoral guidance and resources that are sectoral specific on food waste prevention. And then nationally, we will continue to monitor progress towards targets. So once the testing has been completed and any improvements and updates have been made, we will release it. It will go up on foodwastecharter.ie, and there's also lots of additional resources there. Reports, fact sheets, guidance on different sectors, so keep an eye on that. We're also going to engage through representative bodies, and we will be looking for efficient ways to provide training on the protocol where it's needed, and guidance if we consider there's enough interest there. The food waste page on the EPA website also has more general information on the programme, if you'd like to have a look at that. And then we would also ask everybody to engage on our consumer-facing campaigns on stopfoodwaste.ie. So we have a really interesting campaign running at the moment on how fit is your fridge. Really ask people to check it out and get involved. There's some really good content up on Instagram for you to have a look at. And you know, if there's anything that you'd like to get involved in, you can get in touch with either Odile or myself, and we'll get back in touch with you. And, you know, really, we're only going to achieve these targets through collaboration with everybody across the supply chain, everybody working together to achieve our aims. So thank you very much.
Helen, thank you very much for that. I actually, on that last thing that Helen mentioned, participation, want to put another poll to you, please, if you'd go to the poll tab on your Slido. We want to get an expression of interest in further engagement in this topic, in this area. What I'm asking you to sign up to here or give us a yes or a no on is by no means binding. You are not committing yourself or your organisation to anything at all, but just please give the EPA some indication of your intent and your interest in further and deeper engagement on food waste. One of the really interesting things that seems to be emerging, and I had no idea of this, I'm not sure that anybody did, is this question of consistency in measurement. It has been touched upon by absolutely everybody. Now, thankfully, we have Captain Consistency with us as our next speaker. Colum Gibson, a man who it can never be said that he doesn't lead from the front in measuring food waste. Colum works with the Clean Technology Centre, and I first met him with his head stuck in a bin, and he is still very much at it, and he's going to give us a masterclass this morning in measurement and getting it right and doing it consistently. Good morning, Colum.
Hi, Philip. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
We can perfectly.
Good to see you again. Thank you, Philip, for the introduction. So my name is Colin Gibson. I work with the Clean Technology Centre in MT Cork. We've been working on food waste for quite a while, and I thought when I saw the headline banner for this year's forum, Building Knowledge to Waste Less, I thought I'd go a little bit of back to the future stuff, because we are building on knowledge. And while a lot of the work we did initially over the last 10 years was kind of almost intuitive, I think we're in a much more informed position now. So I just want to take you back before I talk about what we're doing at the moment and hopefully where that leads to in the future. So the 2008 Waste Characterization Survey has been mentioned a couple of times. Was kind of the first time that we had really, really good food waste data. It built on the 2005 survey, so we had quite a lot of data at the time. Confidence in the fact that food waste was a big problem in the municipal waste stream for the commercial sector. It was over 30%, and out of this information, a number of programs and initiatives started. The Stop Food Waste program has been mentioned a couple of times. It's consumer facing, but it did have a food waste in business element at the start. A lot of the information that was put out through that program was then used by the local authority prevention network. The environmental awareness officers involved in LAPN worked with businesses in their localities to identify food waste prevention options, and it was a very important piece of work which informed what kind of came next, which would have been the Green Healthcare program, where a very dedicated program looking at food waste in both the acute and the community hospitals carried out, and this has been continued now with the HSE managing that project. So this was all SDG 12.3 before the publication of the Fusions report and before the International Food Loss and Waste Protocol became the standard method for assessing and measuring food waste. So once, after 2015-16 with Fusions and the FLW, we decided with EPA funding to look in more detail at the commercial sector. And while these results were reported in the last forum, I think it is interesting to go back to them, because especially after listening to what Tuan was saying earlier, granular data is very, very important because it provides verification and provides quality kind of talking points and actions that businesses can undertake. So in this research project, we looked at retail and food service. The reason we did these is, after doing our initial sectoral food waste mapping, we found that the accommodation, food retail, food service, and office sectors were the main food waste producers. Now, offices in this instance is more to do with institutional canteens than to do with the actual offices. So based on this, we conducted, I think, nearly 60 dedicated food waste surveys across these different sectors. I'm just going to talk about food service today. The food service waste compositional analysis was very detailed. We intercepted the food pre-disposal, so that's before it went into the bin, which allows us to get a lot of information about the origins, the types, and the reasons behind the food waste. We looked at one full day of operation. There was a custom classification, which I'll come back to. And then in order to get a benchmark or a sectoral standard, we compared it to covers, or the number of people served. So this is what a typical waste compositional analysis looks like, breaking it out into all the individual fractions. And we heard that spoken about a little earlier. What is the content of this food waste? So we have very good information now for a number of sectors. Our results. The results were very useful. We broke the service sector down into 4 key kind of groupings: hotels, full service restaurants, quick service restaurants, and canteens. And as you can see, there's different levels of food waste per cover in each of them. And this is interesting because if you're a business within one of these sectors, you now have a comparable or a benchmark that you compare to. More importantly, where was the food waste within these coming from? And we broke it down into 3 main areas: preparation waste, plate waste, and unserved food. So just if you look at the canteen there, canteen is obviously the lowest sort of food waste per cover, but it's got the highest value or volume of unserved food. And this is related to the fact that these are kind of often buffet style servings. So you look at hotels, and hotels and full service restaurants and quick service restaurants have more preparation waste. So this sort of information allows targeted actions to be involved or instituted into the specific sectors where we're looking at. And it was interesting. Both Tuan and Martin spoke earlier about the importance of sectoral approaches, and I think sectoral approaches are the way to go in collaboration with the representative bodies there. In addition to this sort of information, we look. Sorry, there, my clicker has stopped working. Okay. Attempting to reconnect. There we go. In addition to that, we looked at what exactly was in the bins. And we have very good information for hotels. On the left there, we know that there's potatoes, meat, vegetables, and sauces. And on the right, then we have quick service restaurants, which would have more bread related to sandwich making and so forth. So we have an awful lot of data. And in addition to this kind of granular food-based data, we went and we looked at the costs, because costs are an important motivator, sometimes not the key motivator. And we looked at just the edible fractions of the food waste, and got a cost based on the purchasing costs of the businesses involved. So this is for a hotel. So on average, it's 3.38 euros per kilo of the edible fraction. So we know that a full brown bin is costing almost 300 euros for that sector. So again, very useful information. In addition to this data-based information, we also identified a significant number of actions for the different parts of the food provision service. And again, these are actions that came directly from our experiences of working with the businesses in the sector. So they're informed and originating from the sector. So what's been happening since then? Through the Food Waste Charter, we have applied these, the methodology and the lessons learned. We've assisted businesses to examine their food waste and identify actions, but with limited success. And the success really, where there was successes, it was directly related to the interest and the time available of the people involved. And I think for the food service industry, notwithstanding COVID and the terrible manpower issue that they're experiencing at the moment, there is a lot of work involved in the waste compositional analysis that we found. So in terms of trying to measure food waste, we can look at brown bins. But we know from the most recent waste characterization that brown bins are not a good indicator because there's so much organic or food waste still in the black bin or in the general waste bin. And it's a key issue. Now, segregation isn't prevention, but segregation is very important for numbers. And because if we can get as much of the food waste into the brown bin, then we have decent data. So segregation is still a very, very significant issue. And if you've been into the back of food service businesses, you know, a lot of the waste management compounds are quite disorganized. And even though there can be good practices internally, they don't often translate to externally. So we don't have consistent measurement being done at a sectoral level. So the benchmarks, even though we have generated very good ones in our research, are very hard to replicate in a real life scenario. So we don't have any agreed and consistent measuring format, and consequently, I believe we don't have a proper discussion about the quantities of food waste, the types, the sources, and the ultimate destinations. So that leads on to the food service pathway. As Helen mentioned, we're doing this with Rapin and Thesis from the UK, who both have a lot of international experience. And we're also collaborating with Flannery Nagel, who also have a lot of national experience. So I think we have a very good team, in addition to obviously the input from Odile and Helen as well. The pathway, it's, you know, we're saying it's a pathway to less food waste and better profit margins, because, you know, these are businesses and they need to be economically resilient. And it's a stepwise approach. And we see this as a pathway. You know, with regard to the waste composition and analysis that we did previously, that's very detailed work, and you're down and dirty in the kitchen. What we want this to be is, before we get to that point, this is using the information that businesses already have. So it's a stepwise approach. And the first one is gathering data. So make a start. What do businesses have? They have bills, they have waste bills. They keep them very well filed, but there's a lot of information within these bills. What we want this pathway to do is to extract the information out of these bills and put them to constructive use, so that businesses can begin to measure and track food waste with the bills that they're getting back from their waste collector. The next step then is to review and improve your data. We speak about food waste in terms of weights, tonnages, kilograms. A lot of businesses will have quite confusing bills, to be honest. Some of them will be using bin lifts as opposed to bin weights. So once we start gathering the information in bills, we look at the bills to see what sort of information we can extract from it. If businesses have bin lifts, we will ask them to contact their waste contractor and see if they can get a weight. If not, we have generated a kind of a conversion table, and this is part of the template that we use. Sorry, just to go back as well, when we're gathering information, we gather information on the waste data from the general waste bin or the mixed bin, the food bin, and the recyclable bin. The reason we do this is we know that segregation is an issue, so we have to take into consideration the food waste that are in the black and the green bin. So if businesses are being billed by bin lift, we have a conversion table. They pop in the number of bin lifts over a month or over a year, and then it calculates based on conversion factors that we have from waste collectors, a weight-based number. Then we establish a food waste estimate, and for many businesses, this is going to be the first time that they get a number, a food waste number for their business. I'll show you how that happens in a minute. And then the final step is the refining. So refine your data collection process, update your data on a regular basis, and continue the path or the journey. And that leads back to the data and the information that we gathered previously. So in many ways, the research that we conducted a couple of years ago, we were kind of ahead of ourselves. So, sorry, this is gone again. Apologies, there we go. So this is the reporting template. I'm not a fan of templates myself. Forward. There's only two parts that a business has to fill in. The first part is about their business, the type of business they're running. And the second one then is for their data. So we get them to just put in their annual waste totals for their brown, their general, and their recycling wastes. From that, based on the numbers that we have from food waste number. In this case, it's 47 for this example, which should come up now. In addition, using the information that we have from the previous research project, we can estimate a cost. So in this case, it's potentially up to 160,000 euros in avoidable food waste that's been generated in this site. One of the most important things that we have, though, is we have the next thing, which is the level of segregation. So because we're estimating the amount of food waste in both the brown, whether a site has good segregation practices in place or not. And it's been very interesting looking at the results from the pilot businesses that we've been dealing with. Again, Helen and Odile mentioned that we're trying to engage with businesses to make sure that this is useful and usable. And this example shows that the two hotels at the start were performing quite well. They're down around 15 and under 10%, but a lot of the other businesses have over 40% of their food waste in the general waste bin, which is obviously a significant issue from a management perspective, from a is more useful on a sectoral level. So there we go. In addition, this touchstone template that we use kind of directs businesses towards better management practices. I know we're still going back to waste management, but this is with a view to getting better data. And the top there, we ask, how did the site generate their numbers? If they're getting their waste numbers from bin lifts, then the recommendation is weights. All waste collectors have weights, but a lot of the times they're not actually reporting them as weight. The second thing then is where did you get your compositional analysis? We're using default figures in this template, but we encourage businesses to do visual inspections. Now, I don't think that a visual inspection will provide very good information, but it will encourage businesses to go and actually start engaging and looking into their bins, looking in their waste management compounds, because a lot of the times waste management compounds aren't set up very well, and segregated waste from inside gets put into the wrong receptacle outside. So we encourage people to do visual inspections, and obviously compositional analysis would be the ideal. And finally, coming. There we go. Just to go back, we have been engaging with the sector as mentioned, and we spoke with Connor Food Space, and he's been basically applying this methodology that we've been developing over the last number of years. He has engaged with his waste collector. He's put a management reporting system in place. He gets weekly waste reports from his waste collector, and he's put that to great effect and ultimately minimized food waste across 4 sites in NUIG. We also have 2 or 3 more case studies on the way, so they're going to be published in the coming weeks. So in conclusion, what are the main conclusions? Look, we know that measurement is a critical first step, but it has to be something that businesses can do. And the pathway aims to take it out of the kitchen and uses the available information that businesses already have to give them a food waste number. We know that there's no one solution for all businesses. So they do need to examine things internally, but using benchmarks and examples from within their sector will be very important. Communication is the key, both internal and external. We've spoken about the importance of advocacy and collaboration, and I think we need that now. I think we have an awful lot of very good information. We have a lot of very, very good data, but what we really need to do is incorporate it into what's happening in the sector. You know, food waste for us is a hugely important thing, and for a lot of people it should be, but it may not be their daily focus. And I think of how ubiquitous LED lighting is now in most industries. We need food waste prevention to become that, the LED LED story of the of the coming years. And we heard from Martin, consumer awareness is increasing. It's going to give people a better market share. So very. And then just finally, before we go, I wanted to, for people who aren't aware of it, just mention the Drawdown Project. So the Drawdown Project is was basically over 100 researchers which looked at the main environmental mitigation steps that we as individuals can take. And interestingly, reducing food waste was number 3 on the list. Within this top 10, there's another 3. In fact, in the top 20, there's 9 related to our food supply chain. And that, that's because there's a lot more to food waste than wasted food. We have a daily opportunity to do something positive in this regard. And I think that regardless of whether we're householders or businesses, we can and must do it. So thank you. Thanks, Philip.
Thank you very much. Good recommendation on Project Drawdown as well. I have to say, I have found that to be one of the greatest single time sucks in my life that I have come across in the last 3 or 4 years. There's just so much fascinating data from so many different areas of industry and human life, basically, that it is something that you could spend an awful lot of time looking at. Colum, stay with us, please, because there will be questions that we will want to put to you from the audience at home, and I want you, please, to put those questions in now in the tab, the Q&A tab on the top or the side of your screen, and also continue contributing to those at the end of or during the Q&A portion of the remainder of this morning's session. It's usually at this point in the session in previous years where we haven't been gathered virtually, where we have all been physically in the one space, that I see when I introduce the speaker from industry, all of the other industry members in the audience kind of going shh and leaning in, seeing really, really closely what it is that's going to come. So I can only imagine that right now in your homes and in your offices, that is exactly what is going on as I introduce Sebastian Garnet from Danone UK and Ireland. Good morning to you, Sebastian.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really pleased to share with you how we started our journey at Danone UK and Ireland to fight food waste. But first of all, just a couple of words on us in Ireland. So we are more than 700 Danoners working in Ireland for Danone. We have 2 big supply points, actually, Macroom and Wexford. Wexford being the first carbon neutral baby formula plant in the world. And we are exporting to more than 40 countries worldwide from these supply points. You could look at a bit of our brands, Actimel, Activia, Alpro, Light and Free, all that. So this is us in Ireland. I think if we think about food waste and more sustainability in Danone, I would like to take you back a little bit 50 years ago, to be honest, where our CEO, Antoine Riboud, made a famous speech where he said that our responsibility as a business, as a company, doesn't stop at the factory gate or at the office door. And by that, he was meaning that of course, we need to be a sustainable business, but we have a responsibility to have a positive impact to our community. So local, but wider community as well, has a big player. And I think this really laid down the foundation of what we call the dual purposes in Danone, the social and economic project, which later on created the vision One Planet, One Health, which is still driving today our actions. And one of the key milestones that we had as part of the One Planet, One Health is to become B Corp certified, which is an independent accreditation who recognize our standards on social and environmental impact, but also help us to identify the gaps where we need to improve. very 50 years ago already, we had that in our DNA. And if we look at more specifically on food waste, Danone has a big player, is part of the global movement fighting food waste. And we joined several coalitions, such like Friends of Champion 12.3, or what we call the 10 by 20 by 30. Or again, we are part of the Consumer Goods Forum. All that is really to change and to lead the change with other governments or retailers or big other food producers, and accelerating the fight against food waste. Of course, we are committed to reduce by 50% our waste by 2030. So very much committed to that. If I'm moving to specifically how we started our journey in what we call essential dairy and plant-based, which is basically our dairy yogurt product. I remember we were sitting in 2019 with the management committee to say, okay, we would like really to push forward this agenda. And so what we decided back in there is we decided to have 5 One Planet, One Health priorities each year, sitting at the same level of our business priorities. And so in 2020, one of the priority was leading the food waste reduction. In 2021, what we created is a priority around circular economy, where of course food waste is part of a big chunk of this priority. And actually, what we are asking is to anyone working in Danone, from the receptionist up to the top level management, is to choose one of these priorities to be part of the group who will contribute, who will lead, the specific priority. And this led to a very high engagement from people, because anyone then can contribute directly and make a difference on these priorities. So I was lucky enough to lead the food waste group in 2020 and the circular economy one in 2021. And I think the first steps that we define is to articulate specifically the food waste part around four pillars. The first one was education, but internal education. We wanted to educate Danoners, our people, first. Then the second one was, of course, to reduce our waste internally as a business. The third one was exploring the possibility to move from use by to best before date. And I know that this was mentioned by Mr. Timmermans this morning, because indeed there is here some opportunity to give more clarity to the consumers. And the fourth part was really how can we partner with relevant stakeholders to educate the consumers. So I'm going to just go around those four pillars that we defined. The first part was really how can we educate Danoners? How can we make them aware of food waste, our food waste globally, but also internally? And how can we educate them to make them ambassadors to fight food waste? So of course, 2020 was a bit complex because we moved very quickly to virtual as anyone else, but we still maintain our very good moments virtually, and we ran some internal campaigns. So with live Q&A with internal experts, we also had some contests, tips, recipe with leftovers. We had also some live streams with external speakers who were engaged in fighting food waste. And also, as you will see a bit later, but we started very quickly to partner with Too Good To Go. And we encourage our Danoners to use this app, which is actually an app who locates local business unsold food. And so then local diners can go there, buy and enjoy the food instead of the food being wasted. The app has just been launched in Dublin, so I encourage you to try. It's a really good one. Looking at the campaign that we ran, especially in 2020, we had a very high reach internally, even though it was virtual, and a lot of engagements towards that. Then the second part was how can we reduce our waste internally? And the first big actions that we took is that we signed up to the Target Measure Act commitment with WRAP UK, alongside other retailers and other producers, to commit to reduce our waste by 50% by 2030. Then internally, we set up a very clear governance at the management committee level to look at our waste, track them, and making actual business decision driven by waste. And by this, I mean, we delisted some products who are considered generating too much waste. We review our operations, so with our stocks, our ways to produce, etc. And we literally took some proper actions to reduce our waste. And I think it was really the first time that waste was sitting as a criteria to make business decisions as alongside many others. Of course, we reduced, but we still had some waste. So the third part that we really engaged was to first define some targets and build key partnerships with charities, so Food Cloud, for example, in Ireland, to make sure that at least our good product, which were unsold, were still donated and still consumed. And in 2020, we reached 82% of redistribution of our waste. 2021 year to date, we are at 70%, but we are confident that we will reach more by the end of the year. And of course, we still had a zero landfill. So what is not redistributed is still sent to produce energy. But overall, big shift in our focus at the management committee level on waste, food waste, and how to limit waste. The next part was really, okay, we are yogurt, we are a short-dated product. We knew that in some countries in Europe, this category was already in what we called best before date. And we wanted to assess if our portfolio of product could move from a use by date to a best before date. So we took all the guidance legislation from Ireland, UK, but also European, to look at what would be feasible. We run a very thorough risk assessment across our full chain from a really end to end. And we run as well some analysis to sustain our risk assessments. And actually, a lot of our product was eligible to move to best before date. So based on that, that was the fourth part really of our pillar. We partnered with Too Good To Go, which on top of having an app is also a very anti-food waste active company in Europe, gathering government, schools, retailers, etc., to really push the movement against food waste. And we started our campaign with them, which is look, smell, taste, but don't waste. And we started this campaign with them. At the same time, we are explaining to our consumers how our product may age after the date is passed. So more acidity, a bit less fruit intensity, and then still look, smell, taste, don't waste. This is their choice to do that. of course, the safety of the product is guaranteed from that. And we are really in the middle of starting this campaign with them. As you can see, in the UK, the campaign is going well, and we have quite a lot of reach from the media perspective. So we are really happy to have joined this movement and really proud of that. And actually, coincidence, but today is the start of our campaign with Ocado, because we are also engaging now retailers to follow us on this movement. And so this is the campaign that will start today with Ocado, Too Good To Go, and our product still on the motto, look, smell, taste, don't waste, and showing how we can educate more consumers on that. I think by end of 2021, we hope that 88% of our volume will move to best before date. So we are changing all our packaging, adding best before instead of use by for products that can do that. And we are adding the logo Too Good To Go, and still giving some more educational piece on our website on how our products are aging, what the consumer can expect if the date is passed. I think moving forward, what's next for us? So as I mentioned, we started with a 2020 food waste priority alongside 4 others. 2021, we really moved to a more circular economy approach. And I think this is really something we want to move towards. We are one of the founding members of the UK Plastic Pact. We worked quite a lot as well on our packaging, and alongside the Beyond Single-Use roadmap, we are still really highly committed to reduce food waste by 50%, and we have actually some actions even upstream with our suppliers, with our farmers for fruits, etc., for milk as well, to reduce waste all along the chain. And of course, we are still very excited and very proud to drive the category change with some partners, with Too Good To Go, especially, to make sure that we are educating consumers and we are driving more awareness on that, especially as it was mentioned this morning, as it might have some confusion sometimes still in the consumer's mind. So that was for us.
That's it. Oh, okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Sebastian. Before I let you go, just tell me very briefly, if you can, please. Is it Danone's calculation that there is a reputational enhancement from ultimately encouraging people, your customers, to buy less of your product?
To buy less of our product?
Well, if they're not wasting as much, they are by definition not going to be buying as much, are they?
I think this is not really what we are encouraging. It's really to say, okay, today our products are safe. After the date, we are moving to best before date. And so basically, even if you have, and we have sometimes some consumer contacting us, say, oh, my date, my product has 2 days off. Can I eat it, etc., etc. And this is really how to help that. Today, what we see in the brands that we that moved to best before date, we didn't see any impact actually, and I think it's not something that is impacting our brands or our sales or whatever.
We'll question you a little bit more closely on that later on. That interesting example of producers talking to their customers to reduce